Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada is trying to determine what caused the plane crash in Fort Smith last week. 6 people died when the plane went down on Tuesday, and a team of 4 investigators began gathering evidence from the crash site the very next day. Carla Ulrich has the details.
Investigators say they will need to rely on the cockpit voice recorder for answers, if it works. A fire that happened after the crash caused a lot of damage to the plane. John Lee is with the Transportation Safety Board. He says it's still too early to know what led to the crash that claimed the lives of 2 pilots and 4 passengers.
We're still heavy in the data collection phase. As I mentioned, even the cockpit voice recorder will be getting to our lab in Ottawa tomorrow, and then we'll have to prepare it for download and probably have our first listen to it by Wednesday. So fingers crossed that it survived the exposure to heat at the accident site and that we can get some good information off the voice recorder.
Lee said it was hard for investigators to move around the crash site because of the trees that got knocked down and the fire. The TSB team finished taking photographs and measurements of the wreckage on Saturday, and they've now moved on to the salvage process. Lee says the TSB turned over the accident site to the aircraft's insurance company, which is recovering what it can.
Because of the amount of the aircraft that did burn, a good portion of it is basically getting scooped up into super bags, and they'll be hoisted out by a helicopter to a truck, along with the bigger aircraft components. And then that wreckage will be shipped down to Edmonton, and we'll be continuing to examine those components in the future.
Lee says the engines, remains of the propeller, and nose of the aircraft are some of the least damaged pieces of the plane, so the TSB will take a close look at those parts. It could take over a year for the final report to come out. Lee says they need to understand what happened, but most importantly, why it happened. Carla Ulrich, CBC News, Fort Smith.
There was a lunchtime rally for Gaza and Yellowknife today. Some are calling on Canada to do more as the Israel-Hamas war continues. And they're desperate for help as they search for loved ones. The CBC's Mahnur Mubarak was there.
What do we want? Ceasefire. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Open borders. When do we want?
They call themselves the YK Citizens for Ceasefire, and they were loud and clear at the rally.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine!
25 to 30 demonstrators carrying signs calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, sharing their message with Yellowknifers.
I come with the folks here to scream because you stay home, you listen to the news, you see the killing, and you don't know what to do. And this is the best we can do right now here, to scream loud and try to educate people about what's happening in Gaza.
They want the federal government to support the International Court of Justice and its ruling that Israel must take steps to prevent genocide in Gaza. They also want Ottawa to resume funding for the United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency. It stopped sending money after allegations that agency staff were involved in the October 7 attacks led by Hamas on Israel. That's when the war began, and it's still ongoing, and people here are affected by it.
We have Gazans in Yellowknife. We have community members that cannot get a hold of their family, who do not know what's happening to their family on a daily basis. We're far, but we're impacted. We're humans. We feel the grief. We see the grief.
Lam says they plan to write letters to politicians, make noise, and continue to raise awareness. Mahnur Mubarak, CBC News, Yellowknife.
The Council of Yukon First Nations is launching a new mobile outreach van this week. The initiative aims to provide support for vulnerable people in downtown Whitehorse and improve safety. Services will begin this Thursday, and CYFN says it already has its eye on key areas downtown. The CBC's Maria Tobin takes us for a ride.
Everyone, you ready? Yeah. All right.
Today we are excited to announce the launch of the mobile moccasin outreach, which is the Council of Yukon First Nations' new downtown outreach mobile service. This is part of the downtown safety planning that Yukon government has initiated over the last number of months.
A lot of people, they take report from someone that says, hey, my friend just fell asleep back here, we'll definitely go and have a look.
So we'll have a handful of harm reduction supplies, we'll have food, we'll have personal hygiene items, and then we'll also have hats, mitts, and toques, and the things that are necessary to keep our vulnerable population warm and safe in the evenings.
You know, a lot of people are staying in abandoned vehicles.
We are doing a phased approach with starting out on the weekends, so Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So all of our staff will be equipped with up-to-date first aid training and naloxone training. And then additional training we will be ensuring our staff are partaking in is the mental health first aid. We're just getting our winter jackets embroidered right now with CYFN and the Moccasin Mobile Outreach Team logo. So we will be able to be identified.
The base is the skyline of downtown Whitehorse.
Ours will start at 8 with the staff coming here, loading the van, preparing the van. We hope to do a little bit of cross communication with Blood Ties about what they've seen that evening, and then our service will run until 2 a.m. So our service is really meant to ensure that people are not dying on the street, freezing, and or being harmed. It's important for Yukon First Nations to demonstrate leadership and be involved in initiatives. It's really also important to have cultural safe programs being led by Yukon First Nations. I think it's really important that vulnerable populations see themselves reflected in the service, understand the historical trauma, the realities faced by Yukon First Nations. So it's really important to have a Yukon First Nations-led service.
Well-known Inuk leader Tagak Curley has rejected an apology from Nunavut's premier after he was not invited to the devolution celebrations. Curley is known as one of Nunavut's founding fathers. He played an instrumental role in the birth of the territory. His political efforts helped create Nunavut. He was the founding president of Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami and a lead negotiator in the land claims process. He says he wasn't aware of the devolution event and only found out about it the day before.
Those who work within the Nunavut government and even NTI need to be held accountable when something so significant is happening within our Inuit communities. They have to remember those people who helped us get to where we are, to remember those sacrifices that we made for the young people and to celebrate together, not just forget about us. That is just unacceptable and not the Inuit way.
Curley says he's hurt and disappointed for being left out. In a written response, the Nunavut Premier's office says it forgot to send the invite. They're calling it an oversight. A longtime Inuk advocate and retired politician is surprised Curley wasn't invited to the signing of the Nunavut devolution agreement. Peter Itinoir was the first Inuk in Canada to be elected as an MP. He worked with Curley in the 1970s. They traveled together, connecting with people all over Inuit Nunangat. Itinoir says it's a shame Curley was left out of the celebrations.
Tagak's finger had been in almost every part of that pie. He started it. He conceived it. We followed, and there it is. He should have been there. He should not have been overlooked, and he should not have been overlooked personally by the MTI president nor by the premier of Nunavut.
Itinoir says one of Curley's most notable achievements was getting the term Eskimo replaced with Inuit in all official documents. He hopes Curley and other founding fathers will be included in future events that are important to Nunavut. A nor'easter is bringing strong winds and heavy snow to Canada's east coast. For most Nova Scotians, that means a disruptive start to the week. But for some, it's a chance to ski down the streets of Halifax. Brett Ruskin reports.
It is a snow day here in Nova Scotia, with schools closed all across mainland Nova Scotia, government offices delaying their opening and assessing if it's safe to open depending on the community, because this really is the first big winter storm, the first nor'easter of 2024. Keep in mind the view behind me here, this is all a grassy field yesterday, dry roadways, no longer the case today. So people are for the most part staying off the roads, staying home if they can, unless they have a couple of skis to pop on. Here are some people out enjoying the weather today.
We love it, obviously. It hasn't really been winter like normal this year or even last year, so we're just going to make the most of the snow while we can.
Very excited to be out. Cora loves the snow. Might be her favorite thing to eat. And yeah, no, just happy to be outside.
So again, the first big snowfall of the year for here in Nova Scotia. Again, snowfall warnings all along the Atlantic coast of Nova Scotia, with 10, 15 or more centimeters of snow anticipated for this part of the country, as well as you move up to Newfoundland, Labrador, they are seeing some snowfall eventually as well. So big snow day here for Nova Scotia. Brett Ruskin, CBC News, Halifax.
A different scene in southern Spain, where authorities are considering new measures to deal with severe drought. Some of the reservoirs in southern Spain are already at minimum capacity. Locals who are seeing the effects of the drought say they're really worried. The water has been so depleted, you can now see the former village that was flooded decades ago to create this reservoir. New measures include financing desalination plants and improvements to the existing reservoirs. Without substantial rains before summer, some big cities are likely to face water restrictions. One of the largest remaining intact wetlands in North America is in trouble. The Columbia Wetlands is along the BC-Alberta border, and it's drying up, leaving migrating birds with fewer options to rest and feed during long journeys. Corey Bullock tells us how a group of stewards is trying to fix that.
Standing on the edge of the Columbia Wetlands near Invermere, Katrina Levin explains how she's building beaver dams.
We go out and we get very muddy is the first step. We're trying to do it sort of low-key and as naturally as possible.
Beavers have long since left the western upland area at the base of the Purcell Mountains for reasons unknown. Their once beneficial dams left unmaintained, causing water to flow up and over, creating a stream where the wetland once was. Something Levin and a team of others are working to change with these man-made dams.
So that recharges the groundwater, that provides all kinds of habitat for organisms that live there, so higher biodiversity. And actually they even provide fire breaks in a lot of areas. So what happens, a fire will come up to that wetland and then stop.
According to Living Lakes Canada, certain areas of the Columbia wetlands have lost over 16% of permanent open water in the last few decades. It's one of the largest remaining intact wetlands in North America and a vital habitat for a variety of animal species. But approximately 40% of this floodplain remains unprotected.
Work has been done on these wetlands for many years, but what's happening now is the exacerbation of the cumulative impacts through climate change.
It's getting warmer, it's getting drier, it has been doing it for the last 40 years, and it's accelerating.
The wetlands span 26,000 hectares, stretching from Canal Flats up past Golden for about 150 kilometers, and attract over 160 types of migrating birds.
I've definitely identified that the wetlands that have water in the spring and the fall are where the migratory water birds are. So in the future going forward, I think that is definitely a concern that we're losing water in the whole system. So we're going to be losing habitat for these species.
The group is hopeful that copying the work of the industrious beaver will help fix that.
I can go out and build this beaver dam and it's going to make a wetland. So at the end of the day, I'm going to see this massive difference and hopefully see some wildlife move into the area and able to use it. So.
Just one way that these land stewards are working to keep this vital system running and hopefully return to a more thriving ecosystem. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Invermere.
It was a wet day in Whitehorse today. The temperature hit 8 degrees, beating the previous record set back in 1984. Rain and snow formed huge puddles and flooded roads. That left some residents wondering how long it'll take until it's safe to go out again, like Sharon Shorty, who lives with a disability.
Like on a day like today, I've just come out my door and I can see it'd be too dangerous for me to go out for any kind of errand. Just out my front door, I thought it was ice, and it is ice, but also now I see it's a river, and I can see all the snow, big snow that we have over the winter is melting, and you know it's going to get colder at some point, and that's going to mean complete ice, so this is a pretty scary scenario for me.
Temperatures are expected to drop dramatically by the end of the week. The City of Whitehorse says it's working to drain the water before it freezes.
How can any of this be fair?
Now you might think, hey, we just need more doctors, but that's not really it.
A Russian scheme here
shows you where it starts, where it ends.
Were you really willing to risk that job? Yes.
At Thunder Bay's favorite festival, Wake the Giant.
Ta-da! There it is.
It appears we have a mystery to solve.
It will be next. He's dead.
A murderer was murdered.
Toronto Constabulary, stop! Here we go.
Make it mini!
I'm gonna push it, let's go.
My hands are shaking.
This is all very overwhelming.
Don't expect anything normal.
I can't believe it. I'm here.
An ancient sport is having a renaissance in the Yukon. Over the weekend, the territory's fencing club held its very first tournament in Whitehorse. It's the first official event for fencing in the Yukon since the Canada Winter Games in 2007. Katrin Pilkington was there to catch all the action.
These are members of the Midnight Sun Fencing Club, and this is a national event recognized by the Canadian Fencing Federation. This means every point scored here adds to each player's national ranking. Scott Dudiak is a former member of the Canadian national fencing team and one of the club's founders. He said fencing is a uniquely accessible sport, but he's still surprised by the Whitehorse Club's popularity.
So it's really dynamic who can win and how you can do it. So, and also you could do it your whole life. Like, people are fencing well into their 70s. At national championships one year, I fenced a guy in his 80s. So.
Yeah, and have you seen kind of a pretty solid response here in Whitehorse to the idea of fencing?
Yeah, so we only really started this club two and a half years ago, and in that time, from just one little kid's class, 11 to 13-year-olds, to today when we can have a full tournament that people will come away with national points, and it's the whole day and prizes and all that stuff. I think that's great response. It's pretty quick, especially for something done just by the community ourselves.
Melissa Halpenny just started fencing this past fall. She said the sport isn't just great fun, it's great exercise.
It's a really good workout, and I didn't think even before I started that it would be like that, but it really, really is.
Organizers say they hope to see more northern competition. Eventually, their goal is to have a Yukon team represent the territory nationally. Katrin Pilkington, CBC News, Whitehorse.
The sport of pickleball has soared in popularity in recent years, and that has players fighting for court time. Jamie Strachan tells us about a new plan to create more places to play.
I'm trying to put it in that square there.
At this Toronto area pickleball club, space is always at a premium. Too many players and not enough courts. It's housed in an old hockey arena whose full-time tenant is actually a badminton club.
The badminton club takes 3 quarters of the time. We only have 8 to 12 Monday to Friday, and it's really not enough time.
Finding space to play is an issue across the country for a sport that until a few years ago few had even heard of. In 2023, Pickleball Canada estimates about 1 million people played at least once a month.
It's such a social game, and you get to meet people, and it's a very easy game to play. It's an extremely hard game to play well.
The game is like a miniature version of tennis, played with paddles and a harder, less bouncy ball, and has been especially attractive to older athletes, like this 93-year-old club regular.
Every time I hit a nice shot, I feel good about it.
That appeal is driving creative efforts to find more space.
I've never seen a sport sort of enter the cultural conversation like pickleball has in the last couple of years.
At this suburban Toronto mall, a vast retail space that used to house a Target store will soon be home to 9 new pickleball courts. The company behind this one says plans are underway to do the same at other malls in the GTA and Vancouver. The hope? To breathe life into dormant spaces with a new reason to visit the mall.
I think there's definitely a supply and demand opportunity right now. Where are people playing pickleball outside of the YMCAs? We've heard church basements converting. This is just going to fit what people are looking for.
Players won't have club fees, just pay by the hour, and access to a restaurant and bar would be part of the design.
I think a perfect night is having all the courts full. I think the music blasting, I think people laughing.
An emerging sport revitalizing unused space, reaching a new demographic, and giving people more places to play. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Beads have been used by Indigenous communities for thousands of years for trade, ceremonies, and jewelry. And while women have traditionally been at the forefront of beading, that's starting to change. Louise Big Eagle explains.
It's usually women doing a lot of the beadwork. Everyone always gets a little surprised, or I was like, "Oh, you did this." I was like, "Yeah, it's."
I've always just had such a deep love for it.
As a First Nations woman, I wear a lot of beaded jewelry, and most of the beaders I know are women. But as I've learned, there are more male beaders out there, and I wanted to find out more.
Kind of keep it interesting to the eye. Like there's gold right here, 24-karat gold beads.
So I met Gary God in his home in Regina. He's been beading for more than 30 years, but as a child, he only knew one male beader.
He was one of the first two-spirited men I've seen in my life as well. So I guess there was kind of stigma attached to two-spirited people at that time. So a lot of guys didn't really want to get too close. But for some reason, his skill with the beading needle and the thread and all that stuff it caught my eye. But I was paying attention from a distance, yeah. And then when I eventually ended up with some of his beadwork, I really grew to appreciate the things that he carried.
I wanted to know why God started beading too. As it turns out, he didn't have the money to buy powwow regalia. So he decided to learn how to bead.
But leggings are something that I enjoy doing. They give you a large space and a large area to express yourself and to add and all kinds of bling. It's kind of in our nature to kind of outdo each other, that competitive nature of males. And maybe that's partly what pushes me as well. And kind of obsessive, OCD, kind of perfectionist.
As I've learned, the beading world welcomes different voices.
Sometimes I might not be able to articulate well how I'm feeling, but I know that I can express that through my art of beadwork. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's special.
Jordy Arnstar is a two-spirit artist. He uses beading to advocate for causes he's passionate about.
That's the beautiful thing with any form of art, is that when you're, through my creations, I can have a discussion with maybe a non-Indigenous person about, like, well, why did you do a turtle? Mm-hmm. Because Turtle Island. Well, why lamb back? And we can talk about that.
Arnstar has always felt supported in his art, but says there are still misconceptions about who beads.
And when we see beauty, we associate beauty with femininity. So it's like a lot of people have this perception that if a man is to make beautiful earrings like this, then they're not manly. Or if they do, or they'll leave that to their woman or whatever. And it's just like that kind of thinking we have to remember, that's thinking that was ingrained in us.
Some male beaders take pride in smashing stereotypes.
This was one of the first crowns I made, or I attempted.
Tom Benjo is a partner at a consulting firm. I was surprised to find out when he's not in the boardroom, he's beading. And he started when he was 9.
My aunt taught me how to bead and had me do a lot of the fill-in on some of the beadwork, so I got all the grunt work. Eventually, over time, I started to sort of my own style of beadwork and started playing around with designs, and but was able to really learn about the meaning when I started.
The heels and crowns he beads for his wife have other women flooding his inbox with requests. He also makes regalia for himself and for his children to wear at powwows.
You need to be able to tell a story, and the teaching in it is you know, when we dance powwow, we're given certain designs, we're given colors, and when we create our beadwork, when we dance, the creator sees us and he knows that's us because we're associated with those designs, that story. And so it's a way of showing who you are.
The beaders tell me there's no gender role in beading and no restrictions on making beautiful art. Louise McGeagle, CBC News, Regina.
And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
Closing this case gets you one step closer to you getting back on the squad and keeping you out of prison.
You're not a detective. You're a con artist. You have a driver's license, right?
Of course, I'm 9. If you're gonna be a cop, what would you be?
Nothing. My dad raised me to be a cop. That's who I am. Stay here.
You're adorable.
You guys are making this entire station look like a circus.
He's busy trying to solve a murder. What are you doing?
Thanks for having my back.
Look at you.
Is this your girlfriend? This is not my girlfriend.
She's way too cool to be your girlfriend.
She's not way too cool to be my girlfriend.
Knock, knock!
Who's that?
He's fired!
I'm starting to think you don't know what a joke is.
You're gonna eat nothing but raw spleen.
Getting into peak physical shape is 50% training, 50% diet.
Never occurred to me to bring lawn chairs out here.
Never occurred to the Egyptians to build the pyramids until it did.
Oh! Simpler times.
Let's set you up with a lunch date.
You're deaf? I don't know sign.
This feels a little wrong.
If accessibility is wrong, we don't want to be right.
Spicy.
Oh, do tell.
Breaking news. The critics are talking.
Oh, this is it.
Imagine the Wonder Years if it were written by Gene Shepard.
They twisted it all up.
No, you can't trust a newsman.
Highly recommended.
Onwards.
Onwards.
Heartwarming.
This doesn't mean I'm better than anyone here tonight. It just says it.
100% fresh.
Well, I suppose we don't need to get rid of the cable right this second.
Son of a Critch.
You look like a cod gasping for air.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes your world.
All right.
Reporting from the scene onto your screens.
It goes on like this, and on and on and on and on.
It's news you can trust, delivered when you want, where you want. On Canada's News app. Download the free CBC News app.
Name something you see people do on TV that you secretly could do better. Host. I knew that was hard.
Family Feud Canada. Watch free on CBC Gen.
We
want you to know that you can ask us anything. Need help with your Riz?
You just made Riz uncool. There is something that's been bothering me. Are mutual funds or ETFs better for my long-term goals?
What do we know about that with Andrew Chang?
I think we can explain.
Watch free on CBC Gem.